Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel.
Today, I want to share a beautiful little story that's all about finding courage when you feel small and the world feels big and scary. It is a tale that I think will warm your heart and maybe even help you see your own fears in a new light. So, get comfortable, maybe grab a warm drink, and let's dive into the world of a very special little mouse. In a cozy corner of a very old house, tucked away behind a creaky floorboard, lived a small mouse with big, curious eyes and a twitchy little nose. His name was Nino. Now, Nino was a happy mouse for the most part. He loved nibbling on crumbs he found, chasing his tail in circles until he was dizzy, and listening to his grandma's stories of the great cheese heists of her youth. But Nino had a secret, a fear that was as big as his love for cheese. Nino was afraid of the dark. Every single night, it was the same routine. As the sun would set and the big human-sized lights in the house would click off one by one, Nino's little heart would start to beat like a drum. The familiar corners of his home would transform into a world of menacing shadows. A pile of laundry would look like a towering monster. The gentle creak of the old house settling would sound like the footsteps of a giant. When the final light went out, plunging their little mouse hole into near total darkness, Nino would scurry. He'd run as fast as his tiny legs could carry him and dive under his little leaf blanket, pulling it over his head and trembling until morning came. His family knew about his fear, but they weren't sure how to help him. One evening, as the shadows began to stretch long and thin across the floor, Nino was sitting with his grandma. She was resting in her little rocking chair made from a bottle cap and a bent twig. She looked over at Nino, who was already starting to glance nervously towards the dark hallway that led to the pantry. "Nino, my dear," she said, her voice soft and gentle like rustling leaves. "Would you be a dear and do your old grandma a favor? I seem to have left my favorite piece of cheese, a lovely bit of Swiss, on the shelf in the other room. Could you please bring it to me?" Nino's eyes widened. He looked at his grandma, then at the dark, gaping entrance to the other room. It looked like a black hole, ready to swallow him whole. He could already imagine all the things that might be lurking in there. Spiders with too many legs, strange noises, and vast, empty blackness. He swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. "But Grandma," he whispered, his voice barely audible. It's so dark in there." "It's scary." He couldn't imagine making that journey. The thought alone made his whiskers tremble. His grandma didn't scold him or tell him not to be silly. Instead, a kind, knowing smile spread across her face. She reached beside her chair and picked up something very small. It was a tiny candle, no bigger than Nino's ear, with a little wick sticking out of the top. She lit it with a matchstick, and a small flickering flame danced to life, casting a warm, gentle glow around them. "Here," she said, handing the tiny candle to Nino. "Take this with you. Sometimes, my dear, all we really need is just a little bit of our own light to carry." Nino looked at the candle. The flame was so small, but its warmth was immediate. He could feel it on his paws. It flickered and danced, and the soft light pushed back the closest shadows, making their little corner feel safe and cozy. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. Holding the tiny candle carefully with both paws, he turned to face the dark room. He decided he would try. For his grandma, and maybe, just maybe, for himself. He took his first step into the hallway, his heart still thumping, but not with the same frantic terror as before. The little candle flame threw his own shadow onto the wall, and for a second, it startled him. But then he realized it was just him, and the shadow moved when he moved. It was his companion in the dark. With each slow, deliberate step he took, the candle's light moved with him. It created a small, moving circle of golden light in the vast sea of darkness. The things that had seemed so terrifying from a distance looked different now. That pile of laundry wasn't a monster. It was just a pile of socks. The strange shape in the corner wasn't a creature. It was just an old, forgotten shoe. The further he walked, the more his confidence grew. The darkness wasn't a solid, scary thing. It was just the absence of light. And he had light. He held it in his own two paws. The circle of light around him felt like a shield, a safe space that he carried with him. He wasn't just walking through the dark. He was bringing the light with him. He started to notice things he never had before. The interesting patterns of the wood grain on the floor, a tiny lost button sparkling in the candlelight, the faint, delicious smell of cheese getting stronger. Finally, he reached the shelf. And there it was, his grandma's piece of Swiss cheese sitting right where she said it would be. It looked like a little golden moon in the light of his candle. He carefully placed the candle down for a moment, picked up the cheese, which was almost as big as he was, and then picked his candle back up. Turning around, he saw the path back. It was still dark, but it didn't look scary anymore. It just looked like the way home. With the cheese in one arm and the candle held high in the other, Nino practically skipped back to his grandma. He wasn't running from the dark this time. He was just eager to share his victory. He burst back into their main room, a huge, proud smile on his face. "Grandma, Grandma, I did it!" he exclaimed, his voice full of excitement. "I got the cheese, and you know what?" The room wasn't so scary after all. Not with a light. His grandma opened her arms and gave him a big, warm hug, being careful not to squish the cheese or snuff out the candle. She held him close and said, "Oh, I knew you could do it. My brave little Nino." She looked into his shining eyes and said the words that Nino would never forget. "Remember this feeling, my dear. Fear is a shadow. It loves the dark, and it grows bigger and bigger in your mind when you can't see clearly. But courage is a light. And even the smallest light, a tiny flicker of hope that you carry yourself, is enough to make the biggest shadows shrink away. It's enough to make you brave." From that night on, things were different for Nino. He still respected the dark, but he wasn't terrified of it anymore. He understood that the scary things were mostly in his imagination. And whenever he felt that old fear creeping back, he would remember his grandma's words. He would remember the feeling of holding that tiny candle, of creating his own little circle of safety. He learned that he didn't always need a candle. Sometimes, the light could be a happy memory, a brave thought, or the love of his family. He had found the light inside himself. This little story of Nino the Mouse is so powerful, isn't it? It reminds us that our fears often seem enormous and overwhelming, especially when we feel alone or in the dark about a situation. Whether it's the fear of failure, the fear of the unknown, or even a simple fear like the dark, it can feel paralyzing. But what Nino Grandma teaches us is that we don't need to eliminate the darkness entirely to be brave. We don't need to wait for the sun to rise. We just need to find one small source of light. That light can be anything. It can be reaching out to a friend or family member for support. It can be gathering a little more information about something that scares you, making the unknown a little more known. It can be breaking down a huge, scary task into one tiny, manageable step, just like Nino's first step into the hallway. That one small action, that one flicker of courage, can create a ripple effect, making the next step easier, and the one after that. If you're facing a dark room in your own life right now, something that feels scary and overwhelming, I want you to think about Nino. Ask yourself, what could be my tiny candle? What is one small thing I can do to bring a little bit of light into this situation? Remember that you have the power to generate your own light. Your resilience, your hope, your willingness to try, that is your flame. And just like Nino, you might discover that once you take that first step, the darkness isn't as solid or as menacing as it appeared. You are braver and more capable than you think. Thank you so much for listening and sharing this story with me today. I hope Nino's journey brought a little light to your day. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more stories and reflections. Let me know in the comments what your tiny candle is when you're facing a fear. I would love to read your thoughts. Take care, and remember to carry your light. See you next time.